This episode of the Lunch with Chris show is brought to you by my upcoming book, 30 Days to Limitless. You can find out more about it at limitless30.com.
This podcast is certified fresh. Freshmediaworks.com.
Welcome to the Lunch with Chris show, where your host, Chris Daly, talks with movers and shakers from all walks of life to get their opinions on important questions. Each season, there is a new question and new guests. This short, impactful show skips all the fluff and just brings you insightful answers from great guests. And now, doing his part to change the world in a positive way, your host, Chris Daly.
My next guest is a gentleman who is working to eliminate property tax in Texas. This is Russell Bennett. All right, everybody join me in welcoming Russell Bennett from Eliminate Property Tax, and that's a nonpartisan activist group, correct?
Correct.
Nice. So at first blush, people are going to think, oh, yeah, that'd be great, or, oh, that's crazy. So I guess it depends on who you ask, whether they like that or not, right?
It's all of the above.
Yeah. So as a homeowner, you know, it sounds appealing to me just because property taxes have gone crazy recently. But the flip side is, well, you got to pay for these things somehow. So how do you explain why this proposal will work?
Our bill is revenue neutral. If it wasn't, none of the legislators would talk to us about it.
Right.
And so what we're proposing is not to eliminate the revenues, but to eliminate the source of the revenues. And instead of property tax, set up the Texas taxing system so that we use a consumption tax to replace it. And our solution doesn't just eliminate property tax, but our proposal is to eliminate 60 plus other taxes that Texas currently collects revenue on, and we'll replace them all with a fair, efficient, simple 7% consumption tax. And that's including we're eliminating sales tax to replace it with its consumption tax, as well as property and franchise tax and all the rest.
Wow. Well, I got so many things to dig into, but first I want to back up and ask you, about your background and how you got involved in this.
My background and how I've got involved in it is goes all the way back to Ron Paul's first campaign to run as president. And I went down to hear him in Galveston. There was a woman next door to him who at the same time was announcing her candidacy to run as governor against Rick Perry. Her name was Deborah Medina. And Deborah wound up having a monthly meeting in her home. She called it First Friday. It's First Friday of every month. And I thought, well, I'm here in Houston. I'm only 70 miles away. This might be the next Texas governor. I might be able to meet her and actually get to know her. So I wound up going to her meetings for the duration of her campaign every month for a couple of years, and as well as into her campaign as a comptroller that followed after that. And we never knew what to expect in those meetings. There was always something interesting every session or every meeting. And one night a guy shows up who she introduced. His name is Rick Cunningham. He's an attorney and economist, and he is presenting his research on eliminating property tax. And I'd never heard of such a thing. I was shocked. I was like, how can we eliminate property tax? What do we do with, I like everybody else, it had never even occurred to me that we could potentially eliminate property tax. And as Rick went through the process of his experience, what led him to do the research, he realized, that property tax was extortion. It's a bad tax. and it hurts people. It drives people out of their homes in some cases, and the CAD process is just, well, that was what triggered him, is that he had gone into a protest to protest his tax on his home that he had just bought from a bank foreclosure, and the price had been cut in half, and the CAD said, we're going to charge you this much, the prior appraisal rate. And he says, no, I didn't pay that. That's not the value. So he protested it. He went to the appraisal board, and they agreed with him. And so he wound up getting his property tax reduced. But the very next year, the CAD raised it back up to what it was before, and he said, this is ridiculous. So he started looking for a solution to see if there was any out there already. And there were, Texas Public Policy Foundation at the time had engaged Art Lafter, who is an economist that worked for Ronald Reagan and had his own econometric services, and they hired him to do the research to come up with a solution to eliminate property tax with sales tax. And Rick looked at that and thought, well, this is the macro level, but he wanted to see, well, has anybody done anything down to the taxing jurisdiction level, which is where you get into the local property tax. Mm-hmm. And he discovered nobody had done that. And the solutions looked good, as far as the macro level of well, this much, revenue and this much sales tax is what it would take to replace property tax. But he didn't find anybody that had gone all the way down to taxing jurisdiction levels. And at the time, we had 4,000 taxing jurisdictions in the state of Texas. Mm-hmm. Today we have over 5,000. But anyway, what Rick did is he wound up doing his own study, and he discovered what became our bill that he wrote as a solution to replace not only property tax but all the rest. And the reason he came to that conclusion was because he said in one interview that we were in with legislators, he says, no matter how I tinkered with a sales tax, I couldn't get it to work. And the problem is at the local taxing jurisdiction level, and that's why nobody has come up with a solution except Rick to do this. And so he wound up going back and saying, well, what if we had a blank sheet of paper? What if we started over? How would we raise the revenue that Texas needs to provide the services and such that the constituents want? And he wound up coming up with a value-added tax, which alarms a lot of people, but it is just a consumption tax. And he wound up being able to make that work. And even so, there are challenges at the local level for that, but it does accomplish the objective far farther than a sales tax can alone. So he wound up writing the bill. Deborah wound up becoming the advocate for it, and she got it. She found a legislator in 2013 that filed it, and it wound up not getting to the floor. And the people that were involved in advocating for it wound up not coming back the next session, so they weren't there to pick it up and carry it forward. But I had heard about this bill, and I had become a believer in it, and I became acquainted with Rick. And I thought, this is a shame, that this thing has just dropped off the radar. And then in 2016, I was on Facebook watching Rep. Jonathan Stickland. And it was the summer of 2016, and he was floating trial balloons to see what his constituents wanted him to legislate in the next session. And he brought up eliminating property tax, and I raised my hand, so to speak, and said, "Hey, I've got the solution for you." Well, I didn't get anywhere with him on that, but I had talked to Deborah about it, and Deborah wound up picking up the phone and calling him, and we got a meeting. And so we went in. It was then in the session in February, and Jonathan was very very supportive of the bill and all. He said, "I love what you're doing," but he says, "My plate's full." And I thought, yeah, the session's already started, and you've already got all of your legislative priorities set, and you're trying to file bills, and so we let it go. We let it slip. We had to let it go. But eventually, I wound up through starting this group at that time, 2017, and through the group, I wound up engaging with Representative James White, and it took several years of talking to him and staying up with him, but eventually last session he went ahead and filed our bill, and so we had 17 legislators sign on to it, the bill, not this session, the session before, sorry. So that's some of the background on it. Last session we actually had 3 authors for it, and that's another story, but that's the background on how it all came about.
Yeah, I have a question. You know, you mentioned you replace it with a value add tax. So is that on products and services in that county?
Yes. That's one of the things that, what we've got right now with the sales tax, and this is what you'll often hear. You'll say, well, you'll have to have a 20 or 25% sales tax to replace property tax. Well, that's true if all you do is continue to tax the goods and services that we have today. It's about 20% of the GDP of Texas is currently subject to sales tax. But our proposal, this was Rick's proposal, was that you expand the tax base to include about 65 or 70% of the GDP of Texas. We have a $1.9 trillion GDP, and if you take 7% of that, you get $133 billion. Well, the property tax and all the rest of them together come to about 86 or 87 billion. And if you assume that you're only going to collect maybe 65 or 70% of that, you get that 87 billion. So on a macro level, it's feasible to do it, and that's how we came up with the 7%, because if it's not low enough, then it defeats the purpose, and it won't work. But that was the secret to making it work, was to propose to expand the tax base.
And so what does expand the tax base mean? What new stuff would be taxed under this? Well,
if you go to, there's a long list, and it's not something off the top of my head that I could rattle off to you. But if you go to our website, eliminatepropertytax.com, and you go to our FAQs, our frequently asked questions, at the very bottom, there's one of the questions. This is frequently asked, so I put it in here. What additional goods or services could be taxed? Yeah. And there's a long list of things that are currently taxed, and then others that are. There's basically 3 types of goods and services that we've got as far as the taxes go. There's those that we tax, those that are exempt, meaning the things that we typically think of sales tax being regressive because it hurts the poor because we tax food or medicine, something like that. Those things by law are exempt, and we don't touch those. We leave those things that are exempt by law alone. It's the big body of the rest of the GDP that is not exempt, but it's just simply excluded. We don't tax it today. But there are other states around the country that do tax these same goods and services that we're proposing that the legislature consider, and that we could expand into and then wind up replacing these taxes with simple consumption tax.
Right. So I'm guessing that, and this is just, maybe my ignorance, I'm guessing that the largest area for increase would be services, since they aren't typically taxed as much as goods are.
Most likely that would be the case, Chris. I think that you would wind up paying sales tax on a haircut or things of that nature.
Got it. And as a taxpayer, I debate in my head. Okay, I pay a couple $1,000s a year, several $1,000s a year for property tax. Would I be willing to, as a business owner and service provider, deal with collecting sales tax on my services?
Each individual is going to be a separate case, but by far the amount of, especially when you consider that our tax our property tax in the last 10 years, when we've had all this effort by the Texas legislature to create these relief and reform solutions, has gone up 78%. Mm-hmm. And last year it went up 12% in the state of Texas. And at that rate, it doubles every 6 years if we were to continue at that rate. So we've got a real problem here. And the thing about the consumption tax is that nobody gets taxed out of their home if they don't want to buy something or pay a consumption tax for it. And I think that when you consider the amount of money that you're spending, not only in property tax, but you're paying with all these taxes that we have in Texas. Some of them are what the economists refer to as pyramiding. They're tax on a tax on a tax. A lot of them are hidden in our goods and services. You're paying there's only one person, or there's only one entity that pays the property tax, and that's the individual consumer. Whoever the last consumer is, they're paying that property tax because it's built into the cost of our goods and services. So if you remove that, your prices of your goods and services potentially could go down, as well as you've got all that extra money that you've not had to, that you've not had to pay in property tax. So I think anybody that looks at it from that kind of standpoint to run the numbers is going to see they're going to wind up saving a lot of money. And it's not, the thing about it is that when we go to consumption tax, there's no carve-outs. I mean, there's not, today we're just doing tyranny tune-up. We're like, well, we'll take, we'll give you a break, and guess what? Well, the tax is going to have to increase on somebody else. So there's all these, there's all this conflict between different groups because they're fighting because they don't want to be the ones that, the property tax gets shoved on. So if we eliminate it for everybody, then, and we do it in a nonpartisan way, and we have the great majority of Texans that will want to get behind it and advocate for it. And our Texas legislature this session is obviously hearing that from a lot of people.
Yeah, so this is something that has to be done. If it's to be done, it has to be done statewide, because county by county it would be crazy, and you'd get higher prices in one county and lower in others, but it would break that fiefdom that is the appraisal district, where they just kind of willy-nilly decide what to charge people.
Yeah, when we eliminate property tax, we'll eliminate the Texas CADs as well. Yeah. And we have to do it at the state level, because the state level is one that the only organization that can do it is our Texas legislature, because they are the ones that created the laws that produce the property tax today. And the consumption tax, there's our proposal, and you can look for it on our website, has a solution for the local municipalities and the counties as well as the state. It's and that would be on a case by case basis, where the comptroller would have to go in and participate with the local jurisdictions to figure out what the right solution would be for them. Our goal is to keep it, the highest tax that we would want to see would be at the maximum of 10% consumption tax in the worst case scenario. But there are situations, and this is why I think nobody wants to tackle this part of the problem, because there are jurisdictions that have no sale of goods and services, and the legislators I've talked to that have been around this block, that's one of the first things they ask you: what are you going to do about the jurisdictions that don't have any sale of goods or services? I said, yeah, that's a problem. But I can tell you what Rick discovered in his research, and it's a 159-page document, by the way. It's not anything lightweight. He realized that this solution could eliminate 95% of the property tax in Texas. And he says, and if that other 5% is where the difficult work has to be done to analyze the situation and see what the right solution is. See, what's happened is we have developers or whatever get approval to establish a new taxing jurisdiction because they're going to, build a community or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And they know they can extort the money that they need for the infrastructure and services from the property tax owners. So they get approval, and they go ahead and do that. Well, maybe like my example here in Houston, we have a community called Piney Point Village. It's full of multi-million-dollar homes. It's got oodles of property tax revenue coming from that. But guess what?
Right.
Being a bedroom community and the terms and conditions they have for it, there's no sale of goods or services in it. So it didn't matter what, you could have a consumption tax of 1,000,000%, you couldn't raise enough. But it may be something that as simple as, those people spend their money somewhere. It may be as simple
that's what I
as,
was thinking. They're spending money somewhere.
You just need to combine some jurisdictions, or maybe make it, county-wide in some cases. There's counties out there, in West Texas that have very few people and very little revenue. So, there are conditions where it's going to be a tough deal to come up with a workable solution. But and Rick's concession is like, well, maybe there'll be some places where they just will have to continue to keep their property tax. And I disagree. I think that Texans can come up with a solution if they want to badly enough in those situations.
Yeah, well, that's what was troubling me, was how you do the differences, because like you mentioned with that community, that's a ton of property tax. But it's a very small physical footprint compared to, areas in West Texas, which have much larger footprints, much bigger needs for roads and stuff like that.
That's right.
So yeah, this sounds like a can that's a tough one to crack here.
Yeah, there will be locations like that that will take a good long time to figure out what can be done or cannot be done. And okay, let's say the worst case scenario, they're left with some sort of property tax. But what we want to do is, in our bill, we want a constitutional amendment passed, and we want it required to be passed before we do any kind of elimination that would prohibit a property tax ever again being implemented in the state of Texas. We don't want this coming back ever again.
Yeah. I'm not even sure why I'm thinking about it so deeply, trying to solve it all, because obviously smarter minds than me have dug into it. But to people who run up with situations like that and say, what about this, what about that, what about this, how do you then tell them, oh, we'll figure that out, and you should still work to push this thing through?
Well, that's one of the best points about Rick's solution is that it's a comprehensive legislative solution. It's not just it doesn't just say eliminate property tax in 5 years and leave it up to the legislature to come up with a solution. His original bill was 224 pages long, and it was very prescriptive about what to do and how to do it. The current one that we got, what happened is that, when James White filed the bill in what are we in, 23? Okay, well, it was in 2021 when he filed it. We filed it as it was accepted in 2013, HB 3742, and all 224 pages. And the Texas Ledge Council, that's the attorneys that write the bills for the legislators, they looked at it and said, oh my gosh, we're going to rewrite this thing. And I thought, that's a showstopper. We can't have them rewrite this in the time that, a 224-page bill, they're going to rewrite it, and they've got 7,000 bills to produce that session. We're not going to get it. They did. Rick, they contacted us in the middle of December. Rick worked with them between Christmas and New Year's, gave them all the requirements. They wound up 2 days before the filing deadline producing a draft. I'll call it that. We didn't get a chance to edit it or approve with edits, so they just said, here's the bill. And they had reduced it to a 12-page bill. So, things were not quite the way they should have been, but they were. I mean, we looked at it and we said, what are we going to do? And one of my colleagues says, we got to run with it. And so James went ahead and filed it, and we did get, 3 special sessions after that. And like I said, we wound up with 17 co-authors signing on to the bill. And every session every chance we got, we tried to edit and improve it. It's still not where it needs to be, but it's pretty close. But that's kind of where we are this session. I wound up going to meet with the majority of those legislators that supported us and asked them to author or co-author the bill. And we wound up with 3 authors for the bill this time. But I'll tell you what, there was one conversation that we had, and Deborah went with me to that one. We met with one of the legislators before 2021. I think it was just in 2020. And he had a bill. There's another popular solution, which is you've probably heard about right now in this session. Is called what we will call the M&O, the maintenance and operation buy down, where they say take the surplus revenue that Texas generates from growth over time pay down the school portion of the tax and eliminate it, which is a good solution. We're not against it, but the legislator had filed it, and he never got a hearing for his bill. And he said, the reason I didn't get a hearing is the governor didn't want it, the lieutenant governor didn't want it, and the speaker of the House didn't want it. They all had their own bill.
Yeah.
And we've seen that again. That's what's happening in this last session, is that they've come up with their own bills. Our bill was filed, never got a hearing in the Ways and Means Committee. These bills, there were at least half a dozen of them for the M&O buy down. They went to the Appropriations Committee. They never got a hearing. But what you hear Governor Abbott right now today saying is that he wants to eliminate the school M&O tax, and he wants to use that solution. And I'm thinking, like, why didn't we have this conversation before the session happened? And why were these bills all killed? I don't really believe they want to do it. I think that this is all what's happening right now with our legislature fighting over the different bills is mostly theater and grandstanding. Yeah. And they'll come out with something, Chris. They will then cheer and say, look what we've done. But you know what? It's already vaporized. The CADs have front run this whole thing. They've jacked everybody's appraisal up so far, so high. It doesn't matter what they come out with as far as relief and reform goes. It's already gone for most people. And they've still got another year to do it before anything would go into effect. So that's why we're the abolitionists in the room. We say no relief, no reform, eliminate property tax, because we have been trying to do this since the days of the Great Depression. And we still, relief and reform has always failed 100%. That's why we're here today.
Wow. So I guess for people who are interested in finding out more, tell them your website. EliminatePropertyTax.com. They can go there. I would point them to the FAQs because most people have questions, and they'll find simple answers to the most common questions there. If they're on Twitter, they can find us there, Eliminate Property Tax in Twitter. But our best place to go if you want to interact and learn what we're doing is Facebook. If you're on Facebook, look for Eliminate Property Tax, and you'll find us, and you can keep up with what we're doing. Right now we've got close to 25,000 members, and we'd be happy to have a few more. Nice. And what action items can they do? What other than joining and learning, should they be calling Congress, senators, or what should they be doing?
That's what our purpose is when I started this, I looked around to find, okay, how do I do this? Where's the pattern? Where's the best model? And I couldn't really find it. And I thought, well, I'm going to do that with this group, as my intention was to empower members to be able to become advocates for themselves with their legislatures and get the message across and become effective. And so we present we're not just there to complain about it, but we're there to actually take action. And so when the opportunity happens, we have posts that will tell people, here's where you need to go, here's who you need to contact, and here's what you need to say, and try to give them the tools that they need to become effective advocates for eliminating property tax. And we have had an impact. There's other groups across the state that we are collaborating with, and I think that it's been 6 years since we started, but the people, the legislators, and the Texas Ledge know who we are, and you can see from just all the noise that has been made over the years, they're starting to feel the heat and see the light.
I love it. Russell Bennett, gosh, I want to thank you so much for sharing what I think is a real important story and your involvement with it. Thank you so much.
Appreciate the opportunity, Chris. Thank you.